Hey everyone, so one of my most recent videos, I just came on and talked a little about the skill-based matchmaking that is going to be in Control, and now I kind of wanted to go ahead and talk about the raid that is coming with the next season, considering we don't know what it is and everything that goes into it. This is going to be very off my mind. I don't have a script for this. I just wanted to go ahead and just share my general thoughts about the raid race and things of that nature, because I think it's important to talk about for the PvE community, and I think that there's a lot of interesting things that could come with the new raid. So I just wanted again to come on and talk a little about it. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. So the raid, I believe, comes out on August 23rd, which is a Friday, which a lot of people are upset about because normally it's a Saturday raid thing. Saturday raids mean more people are included. Like personally myself, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to contribute into the raid race because it is actually on a Friday, which is very disappointing. But I also understand Bungie's ideas and their reasoning for running the raid on a Friday instead of a Saturday, because they want to have more hands on deck so we don't get another Val the Disciple situation, which I think is very important. But when it comes to porting over a raid from Destiny 1, I don't know if they necessarily have to do that as much, because it's more of a copy and paste the assets from Destiny 1 into Destiny 2. It might not be that simple, and I guarantee you it's not that simple, but on paper it could be that simple. So from an outsider view who doesn't know programming or doesn't know anything that comes into developing Destiny in Destiny 2, it might be a lot more complex than that, and I'm sure it is. So I understand why Bungie doing it on Friday, but I think what the biggest question on everyone's mind is when it comes to these raids is it going to either be King's Fall, Crota, or Wrath of the Machine? Now, first things first, you can already cross off Crota off of the list because it is guaranteed not going to be Crota, considering I believe it was Joe Blackburn tweeted or answered a question in a tweet or something. Regardless, I think it was him. I could be wrong. It might have been another dev. They confirmed that it actually will not be Crota. So we know that Crota is not coming back as a raid, at least, or not coming back yet. And now, again, it is entirely possible that we will still see Crota return in Destiny 1 or into Destiny 2 under one of three conditions. One, which is a very popular theory, is that it's going to be a dungeon, and I think this is the most likely, and I think actually the best solution. I feel like Crota as a raid in Destiny 1 didn't really feel like a raid to me. Like, it was a raid, but it didn't really feel like a raid. To me, it always felt like something like a dungeon, but obviously we didn't have dungeons back then, so we didn't know what to call it. So it was a raid, but to me, it was always not really a raid to me, and that's why I didn't really like Crota too much. But I think as a dungeon, it could be absolutely amazing, and I think it would be one of the best, if not the best dungeon in the game. So I think coming back as a dungeon would be great. Now, as it coming back as a traditional raid, that's very likely or very possible as well. Though I think that with them skipping it and saying we're not going to do Crota next, kind of, I feel like, leaves that out of the question. And I think that because they're not doing it next right after Atheon or Vaulted Glass, which chronologically went Vaulted Glass and then Crota, I think that's very weird, and I think that's strange. And that actually might add into why they're not doing it, or why Crota isn't coming back yet. Maybe it is going to be a dungeon, or leading into the next theory, which is people are considering that the next raid is going to be King's Fall. Now, King's Fall is a fantastic raid. We all love it. At least I loved it. Classic Destiny 1 map, taking King, in my opinion, the best raid in Destiny. But the big theory with that one is that they're actually going to do the original plan for Crota and the Fogoth Strike and King's Fall and mash them all into one big raid. Which, if that's the case, that's going to be an insane raid for one, because of how long it's going to be. Like, you got to understand, when you're mixing Crota, sorry, Java update. Anyway, that scared me. Anyway, when you're mixing Crota, King's Fall, and the Fogoth Strike together into one raid, you can imagine how long that'll be. For good teams, like, it's going to take a little bit of time to finish it, and there's a lot of stuff in all of those there's a ton of encounters in all three of them combined. There's a ton of different things. Now, obviously, I think some things would be scrapped and other things would be replaced with other things, but I think they would be mixed together to make a giant, humongous raid, and I think that would be really, really cool. But at the same time, I don't know how likely that's going to be, because I don't know if Destiny 2 is capable of running a raid of that size. Now, I just don't feel like it's gonna be possible. Well, I guess it's possible, but it would be a huge update. It would be a huge cost on Bungie to actually go ahead and do that. So I don't know if that's entirely possible or if they're gonna do that. Me personally, I think it's just gonna be, we might get Bogoth as a strike returning, like we saw the Fallen Saber and Devil's Lair, things like that. We might just see that come back, and then Crota could become a dungeon included with the dungeon pass, like Duality, and then we'll get King's Fall like we got Vault of Glass. And I think that's the most likely situation when it comes to King's Fall. But another raid that is also in Destiny 1 that people are considering to be it is Wrath of the Machine. Now, I think I would actually prefer Wrath of the Machine over King's Fall, regardless of King's Fall being my favorite raid of all time, just because I think that the Fallen have gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to Destiny 1. Now, granted, they do have their own raid with the Deepstone Crypt, but we haven't actually had a Fallen season in terms of they're the main enemy focus. We actually have never had that. People like to point to Splicer as a Fallen season, when it's actually really not. It's more Vex with Coria as the main boss. And that all just led it into Witch Queen as well. So you could even say that was also a Taken one, but I digress on that. But yeah, we haven't really had a Fallen-oriented season where they are the enemy. So it would make sense to bring back Siva in the Plague Lands, or not even necessarily the Plague Lands, but definitely Wrath of the Machine, and have the Fallen as your main target there for the seasonal enemy or whatever it's going to be, right? I think that is the best solution, or the best case scenario when it comes to adding in Wrath of the Machine. If we do get Wrath of the Machine, it'll either be A, this season when it drops, B, later down the line, or C, its own DLC, or maybe even its own season, which I think is probably the most likely now. Another thing when it comes into Wrath of the Machine versus King's Fall is people like to compare, like, when not even chronological order, but weapons itself. People are saying that they'd rather have Wrath or they'd rather have King's Fall based on certain types of weapons. And I know one of the raids has a 900 RPM AR, I think. So that one will either be switched around to be a different TT or different or whatever kind of damage type or RPM, sorry, or they're just gonna completely get rid of it like they did Atheon's Epilogue and Vogue. So we don't really know what's gonna happen with that. So I don't really think that that is a fair thing that people should be comparing when it comes to what weapons are in it. Now, what I do think is a very important thing to do is when you look at King's Fall and you look at Wrath of the Machine, we already have Wrath of the Machine's exotic, so what would the exotic weapon be, right? Like, it doesn't make sense if we just don't have one. So, but when you look at King's Fall, you have Touch of Malice, that could be the weapon, either that's a quest or farmable via beating the raid or something of that nature. That one is more likely based on that alone. Now, this is another thing I wanted to keep in mind when it comes into Wrath of the Machine, is Wrath of the Machine, I believe, came out on actually August 23rd, which is interesting because either the season comes out then or the new raid comes out. I want to say the new raid, though. Actually, no. That's when the season comes out, is August 23rd, and then 3 days later. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So that is interesting as well. So the dates kind of line up for the new season drop and Wrath of the Machine to drop at the same exact time. But then again, it's tough to say based on exotics. So they'd have to either A, not have an exotic for the raid, which I don't think they've ever done ever in Destiny 1 or 2. Destiny 1, Vault of Glass, Vex, Crota, Necrochasm, King's Fall, Touch Malice, and then obviously Wrath of the Machine was Outbreak. But even in Destiny 2 with Leviathan, you had to get Acrius, the Legend of Acrius. I believe you had to do Leviathan or parts of Leviathan. You might not have had to actually complete it. And I don't know if there were for the raid layers, but those don't really count. Let's be honest, the raid layers. Obviously, Last Wish has or had Thousand Voices. Scourge of the Past had Anarchy, and the list goes on, right? Like we're no stranger to these things, so the raids have an exotic, and when you already have the exotic from an old raid in the game, it begs the question, what will the exotic be, or will there be an exotic? Which makes me think that it's more likely that King's Fall is actually going to show up, which again, I think like in terms of we've had Hive seasons a ton of in the past. They're probably the second biggest faction that we've had to deal with in Destiny 2. So I wouldn't really I obviously I want King's Fall to come back, but I think that Wrath of the Machine makes it a lot more refreshing and a better choice overall if they brought back Wrath. No, but that's just my opinion. But that's really all the thoughts I had on the raid. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any more thoughts on the raid and the raid race itself, please leave them in the comments below. I would really like to have a conversation with you guys about it. And thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.